Okay, so this week there was a big deal about the concept that Electronic Arts has essentially shuttered the idea of further Dead Space games. We had Dead Space Remake, obviously, which seemed to do pretty well, actually. And we now have confirmation that EA Motive, the developer behind it, isn't going to be producing a Dead Space 2 remake, and probably more sort of frustrating is the fact that there's going to be no new Dead Space games. I mean, forget the remake. The concept of having a brand new Dead Space, I think, would be absolutely compelling. Yeah, and then the further news that Motive would be moving on to doing things like, well, becoming a Battlefield studio, which, is slightly disappointing. Oliver, thoughts about this one?
I think this is really unfortunate. Dead Space Remake was one of my favorite titles last year. I thought it was like super good, just a really confident and assured remake of an older game that wasn't afraid to change a lot of things actually, while keeping the spirit of the original very much intact. And I thought they just did a fantastic job with that remaster. That remake in every respect: the visuals, the gameplay design, the new environments, new areas, new quests, whatever. And I think a new Dead Space title could be really compelling, or even Dead Space 2. I think that would have been really interesting. But unfortunately, this is one of those titles that I kind of had my finger on over the last year, because it's one of those games where the publisher doesn't announce sales numbers, and then you get nervous. That's also actually a little bit of a worry of mine with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. They also haven't announced sales numbers for that, and that always makes me nervous. But the upside here, from my perspective, is that the first Dead Space game is very self-contained for the most part. It does kind of tee up a sequel at the end, but it's mostly a self-contained game that tells its own story. And the remake is still very, very good. It has big issues on PC, but on the consoles, it's mostly in good shape. Some minor traversal stutters. There's some frame rate dips towards the end of the game as you get more weapons and more enemies show up on screen, but it's pretty good. So I think the game is in good state, at least on the consoles, and I think it's still worth playing, well worth playing. I don't think there's any issues there, and I don't think the fact that you don't get that continuation of the story with new remakes, I don't think that's a big issue here. I would have just liked to have seen EA Motive work on new Dead Space titles rather than just being relegated to Battlefield studio status. Then whatever they're doing with Iron Man, which I'm sure will be interesting, but it's another superhero title, so maybe that's not everyone's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we did have this sort of fertile period where it looked as though EA were actually embracing the concept of revisiting great IP like this, but also doing new stuff as well. And so the concept that they're basically doing Marvel and Battlefield stuff, it's a bit of a shame from my perspective. But I guess ultimately you got to see the games themselves to see what they're actually like. Alex?
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. Oliver already talked about the PC issue, so that one thing that a little bit saddens me about that, I described it last year, but there's going to be no updates to the PC version forever as a result of a decision like this. So, I mean, I just loaded up on a 7800 X3D. I was going to post a very snarky comment on Twitter about it when I did, because I went to the one area and it's just it's like a massive 150 millisecond stutter followed by a 66 millisecond one. And then I walked across the room and it did it again. It's like, oh my God, this is 7800 X3D. So it's going to take, 15 years until the game runs at an actual smooth 60 FPS, maybe. We'll see. But that's the matter. It's the way this works.
I was about to say, Alex, when you post snarky tweets on Twitter, that always goes down well.
It always totally does.
With no repercussions whatsoever.
Never has ever had any issues. But yes, so that's a shame. I don't think there's a need for a Dead Space 2 remake. I think the first Dead Space 2 in its form is really good. It actually has a pretty competent, I thought the original Dead Space was fine on PC for 98% of it. And Dead Space 2 is even better. It has some of the same issues as Dead Space 1, but it's actually a pretty great PC version. And you can always still play that, and I'm pretty sure it's still... Is it still purchasable? I hope it is.
It's on Steam.
If it would have... then it's there. So, I mean, I don't see a big loss there. I just think it's more interesting when EA doesn't rely on these large IPs. I don't have any interest in Marvel. Battlefield lost me years ago. So unless like the next Battlefield is like very, very different in a lot of ways from what 2042 was, or even Battlefield 5 or even Battlefield 1. Well then, yeah. So yeah, I would have just liked to see them. Maybe they had a little bit of there's a bit of backlash internally at EA about the whole EA Originals program having some success for some games, like Jedi Survivor. I think is ridiculously successful for them, but then seeing stuff like Immortals of Avium, which is less successful, and maybe this, which I don't think is an EA original, but it's still the single player mold game like the EA originals are, which wasn't as successful. So I don't know, maybe they're learning all the wrong things, but if this is internal decisions by Motive themselves about what they want to do, then I think you should just let the developers do what they want to do. So
yeah, I mean, the initial report was about how Dead Space 2 remake had been cancelled, and then there was a rebuttal from EA saying, well, actually, there never was going to be a Dead Space 2 remake. And then there was sort of behind-the-scenes murmurings that it was, there were some ideas, but it never actually came to anything. So that's kind of like the various drama that kicked off this week. Battlefield 2042, though, I mean, people are enjoying it now. It seems to have turned around. And Oliver, thinking back actually to when it launched, you kind of liked it then.
That was one of my first videos, my third or fourth video, I think. Yeah, it was a good looking game. I still actually play it from time to time with my friends. It's still a fun multiplayer experience. Some of the areas they went in aren't so keen. I'm not so keen on, like the fact that you have 128 player matches. I kind of like smaller matches. I like 24 player matches, not 128 player matches. That's not my favorite. I do worry a little bit though, like when we look back at Visceral, which obviously they were the original Dead Space developers. They were moved to Battlefield status, and we all know what became of Visceral. So I hope that isn't the case with EA Motive, because they seem extremely talented. Their work on Dead Space Remake was fantastic. I thought that was just an amazing remake of a great title, and I would hate to see them flushed down the toilet at some point because they work on a new Battlefield game that maybe doesn't quite hit. Maybe EA decides to move away from Battlefield, and all of a sudden you have need for one less premier development studio. That'd be my concern. But I hope they do produce something interesting, and I hope this Iron Man game materializes in good form as well. So that doesn't need to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Iron Man's basically tailor-made for great video games,
right?
When you think about it, yeah.